to that child to go towards post-secondary. So that's pretty phenomenal in that sense. So what does the RESP stand for? So I'm just going to go through every single letter. R is for registered. So that means the parent and the child has to have a social insurance number. If you have more than one child, then I would suggest what's called a family plan. And in that sense, you have the one parent or the two parents named on the account as holders of the account. And then the kids who are all part of the same family would be under the account as beneficiaries. So usually a minor in Canada can't hold a registered account. So what that means is the parents are the subscribers and the children are the beneficiaries. And so because there's government benefits attached to the RESP, that's why it's a registered product, and that's why you have to have a social insurance number for all the kids that are being added to the plan and the parents. In terms of education, the money that's saved in the RESP can go to education and related costs. So what that means, it can go towards books, it can go towards tuition, it can also go towards transportation costs, food costs, housing costs. So a lot of times I've heard from parents, oh, my son or daughter is super smart and they're going to get a bursary or they're going to get a scholarship. And I usually say that's fantastic. But a lot of bursaries and scholarships will cover things like courses and tuition, but they might not cover things like housing expenses, they might not cover food expenses, and they might not cover transportation costs back and forth to university or college, depending on where you live, right? So that's kind of important that the money saved in the RESP, whether it's the parents' money or the government money, can all be used towards those other costs. So the idea with the RESP is that you're saving, so you're putting in money, you're not taking out money, okay? And then it's basically a plan. So from right now to when your child is 17 and they're ready, or 18 when they're yet ready to go to university or college, it's a way to kind of get them there. The thing that I like to say about this is that when you have an RESP, it really changes the conversation between parent and child from if I go to university or college to when you go to university or college, I have, you know, this account set aside for you. So even in the student's mind or framework, it changes how they think about post-secondary. From if I go to university or college to the parents saying, when you go to university or college, I have this money set aside for you. So now it's not really a question if they'll go or not. It's when they go, there is money. So there's a little bit more certainty to that. It also alleviates some of the financial pressure. For a lot of students, their worry is not about, you know, good grades or whatever it is, whatever other things peer pressures might be. But when we're talking about going to university or college, the number one pressure that's on them is how will I pay for it? So the idea with the RESP is to get a little bit of seed money just to start them off along that journey of paying for their education. So even I, as a parent, I'm not saving I won't be able to save the full amount for a degree or a diploma for my child. I know by the time he gets to be 17 or 18, I don't think it'll be affordable for me. But for me, it's the concept of saving a little bit of seed money, having that conversation of when you go to university or college, I have this money set aside for you, and really getting him started on that journey, not necessarily the pressure of paying for all of it. So there's three main places where you can get RESPs. There are the financial institutions. So those are the banks like BMO or Scotia or CIBC or the big five kind of banks. And then we have ATB, and then we have two credit unions in Alberta. So First Calgary and Service. And then the second most popular place to get an RESP is a group plan provider, which I will get to in a minute. And the third place is actually investment, like life insurance companies. So anything with life at the end of it, Sun Life Financial, Manulife Financial. At Momentum, the two popular choices that we tend to see is the financial institutions and group plan providers. So we're going to kind of cover those. and leave the insurance companies on the side for now. So with the banks or the credit unions, when I say financial institutions, that's kind of what I'm meaning. There are a few distinct flexibilities built into those plans. So for example, with a bank or a credit union, if you have more than one child, you can actually open up what's called a family plan. And so what that means is that you can have all 3 kids or all 2 kids or all 5 kids listed under the same plan, so that let's say child number 1 uses a little bit less money, the second or third child can use the remainder of that money if they're in a family plan. And it's very easy to do that when you're doing that. With the group plan, it's actually one plan, one child, and the child is actually in a plan with other kids that are graduating all in the same year. So let's say, for example, my child is turning 17 tomorrow, and they would be graduating this year. So he would actually be grouped in a group plan setting with children that are graduating all in 2020, not with a sibling if he was in a group plan. But if he was in a family plan, then he would be grouped with a sibling, and he could share that money. So with the financial institutions, there's oftentimes there's small fees or no fees. So the small fees are related to investing, right? So if you choose to invest, then there are some fees associated with it. With group plan providers, we've seen some high fee plans, sometimes as high as $1,800. So just to be aware of that is really important. Also in the RESP with the bank or the credit union, you can control your own investment. So you can decide if you want to hold it as a savings, as a GIC, which I'll talk to you in a minute or two, or as a mutual fund and invest it. And that's totally your choice. With a group plan, just the way the plan is designed, the group plan controls the investment. So they decide to invest it for you. And they decide how to invest it. And then in terms of the banks and the credit unions, you do not have, when you open up an RESP with them, you do not have to put away money every single month. You can just open it up, get the free government money, and just leave it at that, and that's okay. But with the group plan, you do have to contribute regularly. And by regularly, it's usually on a monthly basis. And so if you miss payments or can't make any payments due to job loss or instability or whatever it is, you just have to be wary of that, right? Because with a group plan, you are signing a contract, and it is an agreement between you and that company that you will pay X amount of dollars every single month for so many years. So it's really important to be aware of that and to know that, versus with a bank, I can call my bank tomorrow and say, hey, you know what? Don't take the payment out for next month, or I'm not going to be able to pay into my child's RESP for the next 3 months, 4 months, next year at all. Just stop the payment, and that's fine. They will just stop the payments and nothing will happen. That account will still be there. It will not go anywhere. So those are the key differences. Because the plans at the banks and the credit unions are more flexible, that is why Momentum just recommends the plans at the banks and the credit unions, because of their flexibility. So in terms of the free government money that I was talking about, if you open it up and just get the government money, don't worry about contributing. This is the government money, so it's called the Canada Learning Bond. So if your child was born after 2004 and your family makes less than $47,630, if you have 1 to 3 kids, if you have more than 3 kids, then it goes up, the value goes up. You open up the RESP, you just have to let the bank or the credit union know that you would like to apply for the Canada Learning Bond. And what you'll see is the next 2 months or so after you've opened up the RESP, you'll get a $500 initial payment and then $100 every birthday year or so for the additional payments up to the age of 15. So if we do the math, the 500 plus the 100 times 15 years is $1,500. So that's about $2,000 that each child is eligible for. That is retroactive. What that means is if I'm from a low income, or I am from a low income family, and today I opened up an RESP and my child is 10, then and I asked for the Canada Learning Bond, they would actually go back and credit me all the years that I missed the $100 credit. So it's actually a really well designed benefit. But parents do have to open up an RESP in order to get this benefit. Without that, they cannot get this benefit. So just one small reminder is that you do not have to put any money in from the parents or anybody else to get the Canada Learning Bond. It's the primary caregiver that's eligible for the Canada Learning Bond. So whoever the child is living with, if the child is living with mom, they will be able to get Canada Learning Bond based on their income or not, right? If child is living with dad, it will be dad's income. So matching government money, that's basically when the parent or the caregiver is putting money in, they get a certain amount matching. So for all across the board, everybody gets a 20% match on the first $2,500 that they put into an RESP. So what that means is we put away $2,500 for my son. We get $500 extra from the government. That's a 20% return every single year until he's 15. That's a significant amount of money, all right? In terms of investing, these are like a 20% return is not what the stock market is giving us right now and hasn't been giving us that for a long time. So this is actually a really good way if you're saving for post-secondary to be saving in an RESP. For lower income households, parents and children from a lower income household, you get an extra 20% match on the first $500. So out of that $2,500 that I was talking about as the limit of matching, the first $500, that parent and the child would get an extra 500, extra 20%, so 40% match on the first $500. So say, for example, parents saved $500, they would get an extra $200 every single year for saving that $500, and that's a 40% match on their money. For this component, for the grant money, people do have to put in money to get the matching money from the government. And so if you earn between the $47,630 and about $95,000, then it's a 30% match on the first $500, which is about $150 a year. And so this is per child. So if you're talking about a family with 3 kids, each child would have their allocation as well. So there's a few ways to invest the money or put the money away, actually. So you could have an RESP as a savings account, you can have an RESP as a GIC, and you can have an RESP as a mutual fund. So savings is basically low interest, very, very low interest, but it is flexible. There's no minimum payment, so a lot of people prefer it that way. Some people don't believe in the idea of interest, so this is a good way to open up an RESP and not worry about that component of getting interest, since we're not really getting any interest on savings accounts at the moment. With a GIC is a guaranteed income certificate, so that means that your principal that you put in is guaranteed and your interest. So let's say I put away $500, my principal of $500 is guaranteed I will get that back after the 1, 2, or 3 year term, and the interest with it, as long as I put it in for the full amount of time. So that's what a guaranteed income certificate is. And then a mutual fund, I like to talk about mutual funds as riding a roller coaster. So they kind of go up and down, up and down, up and down. And so sometimes you feel really happy as you're going up on a roller coaster. And as soon as you're on your way down, you feel sick. And that's generally how I feel. So mutual funds is a personal taste, I think, right? So there's various levels of investing. And so I would say talk to your investment advisor, whoever that is at the bank or whatnot, to figure out what your risk tolerance is and to understand if mutual funds are the right option for you, basically. So it's mutual funds are just a fancy way of saying a collection of stocks or bonds. Right? You might take on high risk and earn more money, and you might take on a little bit lower risk and earn less money. But your principal and your earnings is not guaranteed at any point. So a common question for parents is, what if my child does not go for education? What happens then? What happens to the money? What happens to the contributions? Well, an RESP, so these are the options with the bank. An RESP at the bank can be open for up to the child is 35 years old. So what that means is that it can stay open and be open. Let's say, for example, they take a few gap years after high school and decide to work or decide to sort of figure out what they want to do. Then that money at the bank as an RESP will stay there. So these are your options with the banks and the credit unions, not with a group plan provider. A group plan provider, because that person, the parent, has signed a contract or agreement, there are different rules to that than these standard rules. So the second option would be, if you have a family RESP, you transfer the money to another sibling, or this other sibling takes advantage of it. With the Canada Learning Bond, because it's each child gets their allocation, the second child can't take advantage of the first child's allocation. So what that means is, if the first child doesn't use that $2,000, the second child can't use it because they've already gotten their share. But the parent's contribution and the matching money gets transferred to the other kids if the first child doesn't use it. So that's a pretty important feature of having a family plan and being able to do that in the RESP. The third aspect is closing the RESP. So that would mean that the parents' money comes back to them, and the government money goes back to the government. And if the account, the RESP, has been open for more than 10 years and the child is over 21, then you can close the account and get the interest and earnings back. So if you invested, you can get some of that interest back, and it will be usually transferred over to your RRSP, your Registered Retirement Savings Plan. So these are the 3 steps to open up an RESP. Number 1 is to get your social insurance numbers for parents and children, and then photo ID for the parent, and a birth certificate or permanent resident card for the child. So the most common question I get here is, if I'm a refugee, can I open up an RESP? If you're a refugee, technically you cannot open up an RESP. You should be a permanent resident or a Canadian citizen. There's no reason why you couldn't do research right now before you apply for permanent residency and find out all about RESPs. I actually encourage that, to start that journey right now. And then when you do get permanent residency, to open it up. The next thing is to make an appointment at the bank. Usually opening up an RESP for one child takes about an hour with all the paperwork and all the admin stuff that's involved. So just allocate that time. And then ask a list of questions. So in covering today's material, if you do fill out a registration form, and I do have follow-up with you, and I do have your email, I'm happy to send you the RESP booklet that we have from Momentum. And in that booklet, there's a bunch of free questions provided for people to take to their bank and to ask those questions. So things like, will you apply for the free government money for me? Is there any transfer fees if I have to close the account, or if I have to transfer to another institution? Those kinds of important questions to ask. I think I'm done my presentation. Does anybody have any questions?
So there is one question in the question and answer box for you, Fatima, and the question is, can we open 2 RESP accounts?
Yeah, so first of all, there's 2 ways to answer that, okay? So anybody can open up an RESP for a child. So for example, my son is pretty fortunate. He has an RESP from both grandparents, my parents and my husband's parents. and then he has an RESP from us. So he has 3 sets of RESPs. Anybody that's related to that child can open up an RESP and contribute money. They would have to have the child's social insurance number. And yes, you can have multiple RESPs. But as I said, whoever is the primary caregiver will get the Canada Learning Bond. So only one account will get the Canada Learning Bond, and the others will get the matching money. Any other questions?
So another one did come up. It says, I already have an RESP. How can I know if we did apply for the Canada Learning Bond?
The easiest, so as long as your child is born after January 1st, 2004 and onwards, the easiest way is to check your statements and look for a $500 deposit. If you see a $500 deposit that you haven't made, it's probably made by the government of Canada. And then the reoccurring aspect would be every year you get that $100 payment. And what they do is, because your social insurance number is connected to your taxes, that's how they know whether the parent and that child are from a low-income household or not. So that's how they'll go back. So let's say, for example, if you haven't filed taxes in the last 5 years and your son or daughter was born in the last 5 years, you might not be getting that. So it's really important. This is another reason why it's really important to file your taxes. But you just look for the $500 payment. And if you haven't gotten it, it's a very easy procedure. So just go to the bank, phone them, talk to an investment advisor who usually handles RESPs, and just ask them to apply for the Canada Learning Bond.
Great, thank you so much.
Oh, we have a question from the chat that I think I'm going to answer. So how does the CESG, the matching money, work when the child has multiple RESPs open in their name? So basically the way it works is that if you have multiple accounts open, whoever applies for that matching money first will get it. So in our case, we have both sets of grandparents. If they decide to put money in and get the matching money first, we won't have any matching money left at the end of the year, right? But they can do that. That's totally okay. The CLV will only come to us if we're low income. All right. If you do want the booklet, I would encourage you to fill out the registration form. So the link is at the top of the chat box right there. Just click on that, fill out the registration form, and I'll send you the booklet with all the information that I covered today. Any other questions? So somebody asked if the Canada Learning Bond is not available if income is higher. So that is true. If your income is over $47,630 net household income for 1 to 3 children, you will not be eligible for the Canada Learning Bond. But you are eligible for the matching money, which is the 20% match across the board. So that's a pretty good match, because if you think about $5, the government is matching you $1 on every $5 that you make. So that's, I still feel like that's a pretty good deal.
That's a great deal, Fatima. Thank you. For those of you that are mentioning they don't see the link for registration, it will be at the top of the chat. Maybe, Fatima, if you can copy and paste that in there, that would be great. There's another couple of questions in the question and answer area. I don't think you've answered this one. If I go to the bank, can they help me if I do not have any statements?
Yeah, so I'm not really understanding that one. Does that mean you have an RESP open, or you got a notice about the CLB? What does that mean?
Okay, if Sophia, if you don't mind clarifying that, that would be great. Another one is if there is there any fees that we have to pay if we open an RESP at a bank?
So that's one of the questions we encourage people to ask. And so with group plans, generally there is a fee, as I said. With the banks, you just want to check what fees they have. From my knowledge of most of the 5 banks in Canada, they don't actually have a fee for opening up an RESP, but it's really important as a consumer when you're opening up an account to ask that question. Is there a fee to open it up? And then is there a transfer fee? So let's say, for example, I open it up, for example, at TD, and then I decide to move all my accounts to RBC. It's really important when opening that account to know how much the transfer fee might be, right? So just asking that question.
That's great. And I think this might be the clarification here. It says, in terms of matching money, what is the most you can contribute yearly?
So the most you can contribute and get matched for is $2,500 a year. So the first 500, depending on if you're sort of that middle income or that lower income household, you'll get either the 40 or the 30% match. And if you're the higher income, you'll get the 20% match for the first $500. And then after 500, anywhere between $501 to $2,500, everybody gets the same matching rate, which is 20%.
That's great. Thank you. And then it does say, I have one, but I don't have the statements in order to see if I've applied for the Canada Learning Bond or not. Can the bank help me with this?
Yeah, so go and see your bank, take your bank card and whatever information you have, and then you'll probably have to like see an RESP investment advisor and talk to them about your account, because they're the ones who can actually make the change at the bank. And so just ask for statements, and then ask them if the CLB, the Canada Learning Bond, has been applied for, and they can actually search that on your account.
That's great. There was 2 more in the chat, Fatima. I don't know if you've seen them. You already did kind of answer this one. What happens to the balance amounts left in an RESP account? You did talk a little bit about that. Did you want to just mention it again?
Yeah, so let's say so the max limit, which nobody has asked yet, but the max limit for an RESP is $50,000 for one child. So you can save up to 50,000. The parent, the caregiver, whoever it is, they can save up to $50,000 in an RESP or across RESPs altogether per child. So for each child. If there's something left over, right, then again, you can port it to your RRSP, or you can close the account and take back your contributions, and the government will take back their contributions. But honestly speaking, the average cost of post-secondary just a few years ago was about $66,000 for a 4-year degree. So even if a parent saves, hypothetically, $50,000, most students are actually going to spend more than that on their education, right? So I would be like, it would be hard for me to believe that people didn't use their RESP. Even if you take a few courses, you can blow through $2,000 or $5,000 very, very easily now. So yeah, but it's a good question. And then the next question is, if we have not had an RESP and our child is 12, what does this mean for back taxes? Does it affect anything? So I'm guessing here that the person's asking if they haven't filed taxes and their child is 12 and they don't have an RESP. Well, if you file your taxes, as long as you filed your taxes once while the child was born, you'll get that $500 initial payment if you were eligible, okay? But if you go back and file your taxes, then the government knows that you were low income for 5 or 10 or 12 years, in this case, hypothetically, okay? And then they will actually pay you that $100 back payment all the way back. Because that child is 12, and I'm assuming they're born in Canada or have a permanent residency, they're eligible for the Canada Learning Bond. So they would get that. They would go all the way back. So as long as the parents file their taxes.
The next comment she made, it says that we have filed. So what I'm wondering if she means, and clarify if you would, Lindsay, is basically, does this affect your income going forward? So will you have to pay more taxes due to the contribution from the government, is kind of what I'm reading, and I hope that's right.
No.
Okay.
No. So the way it works is when you contribute into an RESP, the person who's earned the income, usually the parent, has already paid income tax. So you're not going to pay double tax because that just would not be fair, right? So whatever you contribute into an RESP, that is not taxed. So when the student takes it out of the RESP, your contributions, that's not taxed. But any earnings or let's say contributions from the government will be taxed when the student decides to take it out. But remember that usually when the parent is contributing, their tax level is a little higher. And when the student is taking out money because they're student, they're not really earning money usually. And so their tax bracket is lower. So they'll really not be paying any taxes because they'll be paying for books and courses. So everything will probably even out. Yeah.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And I think in the just keeping time here, there's one more question if you don't mind answering. It says, after those $2,500, can I still contribute more during the year, but it would not be matched? Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And it's just the lifetime limit of $50,000. So you just want to be aware of that. You can contribute as much as you want in 1 year, okay? And you only get matched up to 2,500, but you don't want to exceed the lifetime limit of $50,000 per child, okay? And that's just because you might face a penalty with that.
That's wonderful. Fatima, thank you so much for all the information. So before we go, I just want to reiterate what you said. Please fill out the registration form, and when they do that, you'll be able to send them the slides and any more the booklets and any more information that they might need regarding it. And I think that will also give them access to you should they have any questions. Am I correct, Fatima?
Exactly. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank
Thank
you.
you
So
for having me, Jody.
yes, please, if you don't mind clicking through the last few slides for me.
Yes.
I just wanted to remind everybody that Momentum does host Money Talks on a regular basis. It is every Tuesday, but heading into the summer, we are going to go every 2 weeks now. We're just thinking give everybody a little bit of a break that they can enjoy some sunshine and maybe they'll be on vacation. So our next Money Talks is actually 2 weeks from now on July 21st at 3 p.m. I'm super excited about this one. It's called Staycations, Save Money and Maximize Your Summer. There's a lot of talk about that right now, staying in Alberta and just being part of our local economy in order to rebuild. So please feel free to join us or pass on the registration link if you can think of anybody who might want to join us. And the next slide. And really all this last slide is a big thank you to Momentum and Fatima and everybody for coming, and a little bit more information on the different coaching and helplines. If you want any more information, the numbers and email is there, or you can visit us at momentum.org. Thank you again, Fatima, so much for joining us today, and I hope everybody gets to enjoy the day. Goodbye.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye.